In the meantime, should I get started now? Yep, okay, cool. So hopefully, these are the contents of the presentation that you're going to see today, and hopefully this is what you're here for and this is what you want to learn about. I am Elizabeth Blythe, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of context about where this is coming from. I've had a little under a decade of managing up myself. I've been a project manager for about 17 years. I'm still perfecting my abilities. I'm still a student at this myself. So with that, a few disclaimers. This presentation is based off of my lived experience. There is project management technique and theory in here. Hopefully this information is good and will provide something to take with you. But at the end of the day, you're going to be closest to the situation. And the reality is that people are kind of hard, so what works with one person doesn't always work with another person. So kind of just use your best judgment, but hopefully there are things in here that can either give you ideas if you're struggling or just some techniques to put at play. And also, sometimes, even when you do your best and you've done everything right, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. So if your heart is pure and you do your best, you'll probably get the best result that you possibly could have in that situation. But I have so many war stories of where I thought I was doing it right and it didn't turn out to be. So just my little disclaimer there, and then let's move on. I want to start with what is managing up, because it can be a little bit confusing and some people can see it in a light that is not the light that I really want you to take away with you. So managing up is the practice of proactively building and managing your relationship with your seniors. What it is not, it's not manipulation or sucking up. And the difference between those is really important. So the main thing is that there's intent. So manipulation is a self-serving, and it focuses on gaining approval, personal advantage, or favors, regardless of what is best for the team or the project. The goal of managing up is to improve collaboration, align expectations, and make it easier to succeed at your mutual goals. In theory, everyone wins when you manage up. And with that in mind, while sucking up and manipulation and all that can work for you in a very short-term way, it will not work for you over time because you're not aligning people and you're not getting the goals of the project and the team all on the same page. And it will also hurt your relationship with other stakeholders. So if you're ever wondering, is my effort proactively managing and building relationships, is it straying out of the place that it should be in? Just ask yourself, what is your intent? And is your goal to collaboratively build the team to get everybody tugging the boat in the same direction? Or is it a self-serving intent? And if you're falling into that latter bit, then people are probably going to know. So kind of think about that a bit. So now that we've gone, what's the difference? Talk about why we need to manage up. May I just ask for the room itself, why do you think that it's important to manage up? I have a couple of answers that I think would come out, if anybody wants to call any out. Yes?
Well, if you're talking with and transparently sharing with people above you the real situation, then they're much better able to help you.
That's right. So when you're transparent with other people, they're much better able to help you. I would also add to deliver well is a key one that we hear a lot, and also keeping everyone on the same page. Honestly, a lot of it is to protect your project from bad decisions that could be made by people who aren't in alignment. And then let's also face it, to manage your career and improve your trajectory. And because of that, I actually do want to take a moment to talk about career trajectory and promotions, because I did see a lot of this in my career. And it would look something like, actually, let me read what I wrote here, because it's probably better written than what I'll say off the cuff. Managing up will directly affect your career trajectory, and the better you are at it, the faster your career will progress. However, it's not for the reasons that a lot of people think. And the reasons that a lot of people think is because they focus on promotions. I've seen a lot of people get hung up on promotions and confuse promotions with career trajectory. A typical performance conversation could go like this. I don't want to be a junior producer forever. What do I need to do to be promoted? Surely, after doing this job for 3 years, I'm not a junior anymore. And a manager will say something like, well, do your job extraordinarily well, and we'll talk about it next time. And then next time rolls around, and there's no promotion, and then everybody's frustrated. And it's kind of like, what's going on here? So the reason that I wanted to touch on this is because that is a really bad situation because people get disillusioned, they think that they're not doing well, and so on and so forth. And what there really is a little bit of a misalignment between understanding career directory and what promotions are. So I just want to talk about that very briefly. And basically, for a promotion to happen, one of these four things needs to be in place. A senior role needs to be open. The company needs someone to take on more senior responsibilities. 2, the company has to have the resources to move someone into a senior role. 3, the company recognizes a person's contribution warrants a promotion, and that's usually what the person feels is they're not being recognized for the contribution. But 4, the company can't afford to lose someone who's willing to promote for that. So what this actually means is that of those 4 reasons, how many of them would you actually have control over, or even your manager? So promotions are a form of career trajectory, but they are like a subset, and they are not the only way to have it. So why is managing up still good for career trajectory? It's because it will help your career as you build your network. It helps you understand the mindset that needs to go into being senior yourself, and it helps you learn to communicate like a senior. Managing up builds your network, and seniors will either endorse you for opportunities when they come along, and when those promotion opportunities do come along, now you're top of mind. So when you think of managing up to help your career, it is because it will land you in fertile ground and help you be that person that is promotable. But if you focus overly on promotions, it's probably not going to, it will be a frustrating path. So one of the things that I have in my thing is to talk a little bit about different leadership styles and how to manage them. I want to go through 7 types of leader. I want to note that people can be more than one of these, and they can switch between them depending on what's going on or the context of the situation. And despite some of them, like we think of a micromanager being bad, they still have their strengths and weaknesses. So the first one is the visionary. The traits of this leader are that they have big ideas, they're passionate, and they're often dismissive of details. Their strengths are that they're inspirational. They can often align a team around their vision. But their weaknesses is that they can overpromise, underestimate effort, or shift priorities quite suddenly. So how do you manage the visionary? You translate your vision into concrete roadmaps and risks. You protect their ideas by grounding them in feasibility. And you provide options that honor the intent and vision while keeping scope realistic. The next type of leadership style we have is the micromanager. The traits are that they involve themselves in small decisions, they struggle to delegate, and they want constant updates. The strengths of that style are that they catch issues early and they set high standards. The weaknesses are that they become a bottleneck and it disempowers team members. And they also increase stress. So how to manage the micromanager? 1, over-communicate before they ask. 2, provide detailed dashboards, trackers, and updates to reassure them. And 3, earn trust gradually by constantly delivering and doing what you say you will. The next leadership style we have is the chaos bunny. Their traits are that they thrive in firefights, they're reactive, and they swoop in during emergencies, and they may create emergencies. Their strengths are that they're great in a crunch, and they're decisive under pressure. Their weaknesses are that they can create emergencies to operate, they can burn out teams, and they can neglect long-term planning. So how do you manage them? Surface risks early in a language that they respond to. Frame proactive planning as a way to reduce crises, and keep calm when they escalate. Don't catch their panic. The next is the delegator. Traits. They're a big picture focus. They leave details to others, and they rarely intervene. Strengths. They empower autonomy. They avoid micromanaging. The weaknesses, though, they can appear disengaged, they may miss risks, and they may fail to advocate for the team or leave a gap in leadership. How to manage. Provide concise summaries with clear asks. Don't assume that they'll spot issues. Escalate risks directly and clearly to ensure their intention. And seek alignment often to avoid drifting off course. The next type of leader we have is the analyst. Their traits are that they rely on metrics, reports, and logic over intuition. The strengths are that they are rational, transparent, and a predictable decision maker. Their weaknesses are that they can miss creative and qualitative insights. They can be slow to act without proof. How to manage. Pair numbers with a story to enhance the message or provide a full picture. Connect metrics to outcomes they care about: return on investment, player engagement, stability. Avoid appearing to give opinions and instead provide data. The next leadership style we have is the politician. Their traits are that they are skilled at navigating power structures. They're focused on visibility and alliances. Their strengths are that they get resources, manage executives, and shield the team from politics. Their weaknesses are that their decisions may be more about optics than substance and may over-rely on relationships to lead. So how to manage them? Frame updates in ways that are sensitive to their reputation. Anticipate what their stakeholders will be asking them and arm them with answers. Consider how your requests will impact their reputation and frame them appropriately. And finally, the last leadership style we have is the servant leader. Their traits are that they focus on supporting and empowering a team, and they remove blockers. Their strengths are that they build trust, morale, and loyalty. Their weaknesses are that they can fail to push back or advocate upward and may avoid making hard calls. So how to manage them? Be clear about what the team truly needs. Support them when they need to escalate to higher leadership with evidence and framing. And reinforce their leadership style by showing appreciation for the positive impact. I wanted to go over the leadership styles before we get into some of the things that tell you when things are going well and when things are not. I want to talk about both red flags and green flags, and I also want to talk about this in a way that I want to be very clear that if you see a red flag, that does not mean you're dealing with a bad manager. What that means is that you have work to do as a producer. So what do they look like? Well, green flags. You're getting invited to meetings and events by your seniors, especially if it's just for your opinion or the pleasure of your company, rather than a social obligation or because you're a stakeholder. Another green flag is that your work is on track and you're receiving positive feedback. Another green flag is that you can reach your senior stakeholders when you need them. And then you have frequently non-work related contact with your critical stakeholders, like coffees or chattering in the kitchen. So now I want to talk about the red flags. And again, if you have a red flag, that does not mean that management is bad. It just means that you have work to do in your communication. You cannot contact the senior manager when you need them. Potentially, they're avoiding you or even pawning their communication with you off to someone else. They may frequently miss scheduled check-ins, especially when you need to speak to them. Another red flag, manager is pulling you aside to tell you that you're doing wrong frequently, and this may not be coming directly from the manager who is talking to you. Another thing is a manager is micromanaging your work more and more instead of giving you more and more autonomy. A manager changes their mind frequently or doesn't uphold their end of agreements, or their priorities frequently shift with no clarity or explanation. You are being asked to re-explain things that you have already explained over and over again. The senior management appears to be blindsided by information that you thought they knew and understood. You are excluded from conversations, reviews, or meetings where your input matters. Decisions are being made without your input or consultation. A manager frequently asks others to revalidate what you've already told them. The manager expresses surprise and disappointment with outcomes. The tone of interaction feels increasingly tense, curt, or dismissive. Team members express conflicting things about leadership's direction, showing that the messages are not landing. And stakeholders above the senior in question are raising concerns you thought were already addressed. So if any of that's happening, then it probably means there's some alignment work, some trust work, and relationship building that would be very useful to you. Another final note on this. Experiencing a red flag is not the end of the world. These flags are intended to be signposts, kind of like when you're running a race. If you see it happen, it doesn't mean that everything's going terrible. Sorry, that's totally my fault. I thought I turned that off. But it just means it's time to think about course correction or what proactive steps can you take in order to improve the situation. So with that, I want to talk about some techniques. I'm going to share 8 techniques with you that I've come to rely on over the years. There are a lot of amazing tools and techniques out here, but these are the ones that I personally use that hopefully will be useful to you. The first one is identification, otherwise known as who's who in the zoo. I always, whenever I start a new project, or even if it's in a company that I've been working for 5 years, if I'm starting a new project, I will sit down and I'll grab the org chart and I will go, who are the people that are critical? Who can promote or fire me? Who can make a decision that will tank or severely damage my project? Who controls the resources that I need, whether it's budget, staffing, or green lighting? And who has influence in the organization paired with a high interest in what I'm doing? Once you know the answers to those questions, you have identified your critical stakeholders, and they are the group of people who will almost always be your seniors or your peers. The second technique I call the why analysis. Once you have your critical stakeholders, you want to find out what are their whys. Now, when I was originally taught this, I came from the financial services industry, and they would call it WIFM, what's in it for me, but I don't really like that because it implies that everybody's self-centered, and a lot of people aren't. A lot of the whys that you see typically look like things like they want to do their job well. If that's the case, what kinds of key performance indicators are they beholden to? How do the people know that they're doing their job well, and how does your work relate to that? Another thing is people often care about their reputation. In whose eyes, and how does your work relate to that? Some people, unfortunately, do care about building their own power base and being a bigwig. Just a word of warning, you do not want to get involved in those kind of politics. It is not worth it. However, I've seen it time and time again. That sort of thing is short-lived. So if you are on the side of being a producer and you're engaging in that, then you're probably sitting more in the manipulation side. Because remember, we were talking earlier about the difference between managing up being intent, and one is to align the team and goals and get everybody to pull the boat in the same direction. If you're doing it for your own glorification, well, it's going to be short-lived and things will go bad. Ultimately, the intersection between what you're working on and what the other person's why is a place of high-value communication. That's where you have a lot of leverage in order to build a relationship. It's a place to align communication and trust build. And this analysis part is important because it arms you to do things like anticipate their needs, identify when to engage them, know what evidence they tend to rely on to make decisions, and matching and mirroring, meeting communication preferences and delivering information in the highest absorption capacity. The next technique, trust equation. Trust is equal to credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-interest. What that means is that if you are credible, that means that when you speak, you don't say things that are untrue or that you're not sure of, and that you can back that with evidence. Reliability is that do you do what you say you will? If you say you're going to show up at 5 p.m., do they know that you're going to show up at 5 p.m.? And if the answer is always yes, you are reliable. The last one is intimacy. What that refers to is how well do you know them and how often do you interact? If you know the name of their names of their children, their dog, their hobbies, and that sort of thing, and you interact with them more than once a week, then you probably have a high intimacy. But if you only see them once a month, and at that point in time you're struggling to remember anything about them, then it's probably low intimacy. The self-interest part is a very interesting thing, because the only time self-interest works for you is when your self-interest is in alignment with their self-interest. It's almost like if you are being advertised to, and like Gillette's selling razors in a thing. You might have a big bushy beard and want to shave your beard, but you're still going to trust that this is the best razor ever a lot less when you know you're being marketed to than if you don't know and you're just thinking that you need a razor. So self-interest is the divider, and when people detect self-interest, their trust in you will go down unless they believe that the self-interest is aligned, in which case it's a multiplier. I hope that makes sense. The next technique that we have is the buy-in equation. This may seem self-explanatory, and probably the last one did as well a bit, but you want to look after other people. If you know their whys, and you know you're now in a good position to proactively engage them about the things that they care about, early engagement is the practice of inviting people in, informing and aligning before a situation becomes critical or decisions that they care about are being made. Whenever you see something coming on the horizon, ask yourself, who cares about this? Those are the people that you want to make sure that you're talking to. How involved should they be? How do you plan to bring them into the situation and involve them at the right level? And how should I manage their engagement over time? And then proactively reach out. This can even look like, hey, I'm starting a new project with focus on XYZ. How do you want me to engage with you around that? And how often should I touch base, and in what medium? Ongoing communication is the creation of a feedback loop. So when change happens, feedback can occur. And sometimes one way to do that is to have a scheduled check-in. The other one is just, I know that Elizabeth cares about ABC. Anytime there's a change in ABC, I know there's a trigger for me to go talk to Elizabeth, and to think your way through that. Clear signs that this is going well. You remember when you last spoke to the critical stakeholder and what was said. The critical stakeholder isn't complaining that they should have been a part of a conversation or a decision. And some useful engagement tools that I do like around this are things like meeting minutes, regular catch-ups, both formal and informal, and reporting. The next technique I have is alignment. This is the fine art of getting and keeping everyone on the same page, which for me, at least, is the hardest work of production. First, preempt non-alignment by identifying who cares and consult with them prior to decisions being made. I call it pre-alignment. If you communicate frequently and know what a person prefers, you may even be able to simply act in accordance to what you know they'd want. If you don't, it's perfectly fine to sound them out. Even be frank that you're seeking their opinion before moving into the official decision-making process. In fact, that in itself is relationship building, because a lot of people love to give their opinions. So if you go to them and you know that in 3 days' time you're going to have a meeting where you're going to make a decision, go talk to them before the meeting. Get an idea of what they want and what they're going to say, and that can help get them in line. And you can even maybe influence them before the actual process of decision-making. Seniors will expect to have a say in decisions in their domain, and they often outweigh your vote as a producer. So in this instance, you may need to strategically figure out who can speak on your behalf and bring that third party into the consultation before the decision is made. I once had a previous employer who would often dismiss the things I would say. So I figured out who that senior manager would listen to, and I started bringing them to the meetings. And that really, really helped me. Second, be alert to detect when people are not aligned. This can show up as confusion. So people who are responsive, I'm confused why we're doing this, I'm confused with doing that. And you know that they know why you're doing it, but if they keep on saying they're confused, what they're really saying is, I don't agree. So if that happens, particularly from seniors, that's where you can see the asking to explain yourself over and over again multiple times, even though you thought what they're really saying is, I don't agree, and they're trying to be polite about it. When this happens, start having conversations. Treat it as a project issue, and don't let it go if it can affect your delivery. If it can't affect your delivery, it's fine if they don't agree, but if they're going to slow you down or if they're going to stop, you do need to treat that as a project issue and resolve it. I probably wouldn't write it in bold letters that Elizabeth does not agree with the solution, but I would mentally note Elizabeth does not agree with the solution, and I would work on that problem like as if it was any other project problem that I had. And finally, ensure ongoing alignment by setting up transparent communication, feedback loops, and decision-making protocols. So those are things like team agreements. How do we make decisions in this particular project? Is it something where I just have a private conversation with somebody and we have an email that's documented? Or is it we have a meeting about it, the entire team is aligned, and then we make a note in a decision register? Like, that is the way, once everybody knows that there's an official process to make decisions, it can make it a lot clearer the decision has actually been made, rather than, oh, the decision was made in that room, in that corner, and then somebody else being like, I didn't know a decision was made. So if you have the official process and everybody knows what it is, then it's a very binary, we've done it or we haven't done it. And it's also something you can refer to when somebody's trying to overturn your decisions. Another example is this: anytime a decision is made, announce it somewhere. Very, very helpful. All right, the next technique is framing. The way you say things is important. And I will be honest, I am asking you to listen to me. This is where I am not very good. I often walk in and very tactlessly say exactly what I'm thinking and did not frame it properly, and then I go, gee, I wish I had framed that properly. So, framing problems as choices. So rather than there is an issue with X, go in and say, I'm thinking that we might want to look at doing X or Y. What do you think? Oh, actually I have it written here. Instead of saying, we have a problem and it is X, say, this is a situation we have or expect to have, and here are some possible ways we can tackle it. Better framing. All right, lead with the headline or an executive summary, and assume they will simply accept it as true, and then provide the supporting detail if asked. Do not start with the supporting detail. So that often means something like going and saying, hey, here is the thing that I am trying to do, and just treat it like they're going to accept, because there is I like to call it shaping the world. And that is where I know what I want, and I make the decision about what I'm going to try to get because I'm the producer and I'm aiming to deliver something for the project. And if I assume that I am in the right and whatnot, it changes the way I talk subtly to where they will also respond that way, unless they have a preconceived reason not to. And by virtue of my going in with confidence, I have shaped the world. That even if it doesn't land exactly where I wanted it to start with, I will probably be landing in the target or the vicinity of the target of what I was saying, or where I was intending to lead. So go in, start with your headline, treat it like it is true, and then if they ask, then you can provide the supporting detail in the argument. But if you start with the supporting details and trying to convince them, then you're coming in with, I don't believe that this is true. I don't, you lead for me. And so that's just kind of a bit of a shaping of the world kind of thing. Another thing is, instead of saying no, reframe it. If I do X, then I won't be able to do Y. Or explain why something is a no and offer other options. I'm really sorry I can't come and do that thing tonight after 6 p.m. I have a dinner that I have to go to. I can work on it tomorrow first thing, or maybe I can get somebody else in order to come step in to assist. That is a way of saying no that is a lot more palatable than, no, I'm not doing that. And another thing around framing is focus on their business goals and what you need to talk, and how what you need aligns with those goals. The next technique is setting boundaries. I hope that looks like offense. That was my intent. Boundaries are non-negotiables. And you'll get more respect by treating them that way than negotiating around them. So for example, if your manager wants you to work late, but working late is a boundary, you say, I'm really sorry, I can't do that. However, I can do ABC. I can come in early tomorrow. I can do other things. I once had a manager who told me never to ask if I can take leave because it's a person's right to take leave. So I just respectfully tell them when I'm taking leave. And that was really early in my career, and I've kind of drawn that out to other things. Now, the things that you choose to have boundaries around will be a little bit dependent on your personality and what works for you, but it is okay to have them, and it's actually important that you have them. Particularly when you're engaging with senior managers, having those boundaries and framing them the right way and moving them the right way is actually part of how seniors themselves act. And so when you act that way, you're signaling that you are a peer, and that itself makes you more able to be seen in those more senior roles. Does that make sense? Learning to set your boundaries the correct way signals that you're appropriate social status amongst your seniors. It's worth coming up with a series of canned responses so that you have practiced ways to respond with particular challenges to your boundaries that are both healthy and polite. I don't tend to say no way. I tend to say things like, that's not feasible because of ABC, but I can do this instead. Or ask, given that this isn't possible, how would you like to proceed? So I can't do that, what would you like to do instead? All right. I won't say that I've done every one of these in my career, but I have done a few of these. And these are the things where sometimes you get stuck in a situation where you just have to be a little bit blunt, even though you always want to be polite and whatnot. But here are the things that you want to avoid doing as much as possible when you're dealing with senior managers. If it happens, sometimes it must. Just use judgment and know that when you're doing these things, it is because you had to. And the first one is making their job harder. If you can avoid making their job harder, and you are usually a person that they can come to for solutions or support, you'll have a much easier time. Of course, sometimes you're going to have to make somebody's job harder because you're going to have to go to them and present them with a problem that you need help with that you cannot solve on your own. But if you can make it easier and you're always focused on making it easier, it'll work a lot better. Don't do the I gotcha. I am guilty of this. That is where you catch them saying or doing something incredibly stupid. Resist the urge to point it out publicly. There was an instance where I ran a project, 100% like textbook Scrum, and then at the end of the project, in the very last retrospective, the senior manager said, I'm really glad we didn't do any of that agile crap. And I said, well, that was textbook Scrum. What I really should have done, because I guarantee you that person was not very happy with me embarrassing them that way, is privately have the discussion, if you have to have it. And sometimes it's fine to just put your ego away and go, you know what? I don't need to have that win. And that's probably an okay thing to do. Ask yourself if you really need it, particularly when you're dealing with senior managers. All right, another gotcha. Don't hide information that they need. If they likely want to know, do not lie to them. I have had people tell me that they've lied in reporting because they were pressured to do so. Don't do that. If anybody ever pressures you to lie in a report, go to the manager of the person who pressured you to lie and say, hey, look, this is the real deal. I've been asked to write this in the reporting. What do you want me to do? But don't lie in a report. In general, don't do things that will make them distrust you. If you think something will make them believe you're not on the level, get ahead of it and explain why that's going to appear that way. So if you have a concern that, if you made a decision and it could look like you don't care about the project, or go talk to that person and explain to them what's going on, so that way when they do hear it from the other side of the rumor mill, that they know what was happening and they're presupposed and they're correct. Another thing is, don't surprise your manager or a senior manager or put them on the spot, especially with a big, high-pressure decision that requires an immediate response. If you have any foresight as to what's coming down that pipeline and it's going to hit them hard, make sure that you talk to them first and try not, you can even just say, hey, look, here's the head thing. We don't have to make the decision right now. Let's catch up later on and make the decision. But if you're in a big room with a group like this and then they have a high-pressure decision that's like make or break the project, you don't want to have that kind of pressure in a surprise situation. All right. I have mentioned before that occasionally I would use a coalition of other people in order to get things across when I myself didn't have enough leverage. So I might go, there was one situation where the only person that the senior manager would listen to was an architect, so I started bringing the architect to the meeting. You have to be a bit careful with this one. So I want to just explain a little bit of the caveats. If you use a coalition with other leads or people to influence, be careful about how that can be perceived. It's really useful to preempt in the preemptive phase, and it's easily a natural part of consultation. So it's easily very natural for you to go around and talk to people about what it is and start to gather ideas and whatnot. But if you handle it poorly and are perceived to be creating a block of mutiny, it can be a bit of it won't serve you well. It will undermine trust. So again, sometimes you have to. Sometimes you've been hired to do a job, and that manager's not playing ball, and you need to get this project over the line for maybe your direct manager, or maybe their seniors, and you just have to do what you have to do. But no, it's going to affect your relationship, and kind of get ahead of that if you can. And again, it is a perfectly okay thing to do. As we said, sometimes your decision process is to go around and talk to people and consult and start to align people, and there is nothing wrong with that. But there are ways that you can do it that are the wrong way. All right, here's another one. Don't make the mistake that timing doesn't matter. Timing matters. So choose moments when a senior manager is most receptive. I think there's this thing there, they say that judges who, if your decision's in the morning before they've had lunch, you're in a lot more trouble than afterwards when they're well fed. It's the same thing with your managers. If you catch them at a bad time and you kind of know that they're early in the morning on Mondays, maybe Monday morning is the time to have your catch-up or decision-making meetings with them, or your backlog grooming, or whatever it is that really, really causes problems in your project. So if they're grumpy before their morning coffee, don't talk to them about sales figures then. If you think a thing you said will embarrass them, don't do it in public, and talk to them in private. I actually think that was linked to something else. I'm probably missed up my notes there. Here's another one. Again, these are all the things that I have probably done in my career at one stage or another, and hopefully won't do again. Where possible, maintain your composure, even when extremely, extremely stressed. This reassures seniors and makes them more likely to trust your judgment and want to put their faith in you when things aren't going well. Some strategies for maintaining your composure. Step away when your autonomous nervous system is going to get the better of you. That means, for me, I tend to break out into tears. But you don't want to be doing that sort of thing. If you can, possibly, and you need to get away from that situation, or there's another thing. I actually had a therapist once who told me to go somewhere and hum, because it hijacks the part of the limbic system that is prone to those sorts of things. And not everyone has those types of stress responses, but unfortunately I do. But you don't want it to get the better of you, because it will make people trust you less. Another thing that you can do is meditate, manage stress with yoga, and potentially therapy. Although it may, if it is that bad of a day, you may want to consider if that environment is right for you. So if you're constantly in that state of hypervigilance and whatnot, you're probably not in a good position work-wise, and you might want to reconsider working at that place. Another one, don't do this. Fail to document your decisions. Keep a clear record of agreements, decisions, and changes so you know where they came from and you can show an audit trail of how a decision was made or how a conversation was necessary. Now again, sometimes you have to do these things. Sometimes you do have to correct a senior manager when they have made a mistake and you're in a situation where a decision is being made. Sometimes you do have to tell people they're wrong. Sometimes your autonomic nervous system is going to get the best of you because we're human. But these are the things that if you can minimize or reduce, it's a good thing. So now, hopefully, we have 10 minutes for questions. Anyone have a question? Yes?
If you get, like you've got two managers or your manager plus the adjacent manager, giving you conflicting guides or conflicting instructions.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that. What do you do when you have two senior managers giving you conflicting instructions? I tell them to get into a room, battle it out, and come and tell me what the answer is. No, actually, that is the truth. Sometimes you get them to align, and you say, look, my hands are tied until a decision is made. This person and you do not see eye to eye. Can I ask you to go have a conversation with that person and just let me know how it goes? Or, hey, maybe all three of us can sit down and have a discussion about it. It depends on how much you need to protect what's going on in the project. So if you think that, it also depends on who you are siding with in your heart of hearts. If you're like, oh, I think, then you might want to support that person in having that conversation with a third party. But if you genuinely don't care, you just need a decision made, you can tell them to go have the conversation themselves. Just don't take it on that you have to solve that problem. You can just be very frank. I cannot move ahead and get a result until you have made this decision. So be very transparent about what needs to happen to allow you to move on. Any other questions that I can help with?
Hello.
Hi.
I wanted to ask for the boundaries topic. What do you think is the best way to bring up boundaries, especially if it's a new manager? Or if you could give an example, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay. I think the example that I use is being asked to work late. And in that case, I would just say, I'm sorry, I can't work late in order to do this. It's asking for more time than I actually have available, or I have something on. How would you like to proceed? With regards to examples, it can really be anything. So it could be that, every Tuesday morning you put aside time in order to document things on your project, and that time is always being swept away by something. In those situations, and unfortunately you do have to have conversations about them. You can't just expect it to solve itself. Generally speaking, I would go and say, here's the impact of the situation that's occurring. Here's what I need out of that. And if the major advice or the underlying piece of advice is assume that you have a right to your boundary. Once you've assumed that they have a right to the boundary, why are you questioning this? We're looking to solve the problem of how do we get around the fact that this is the way it has to be, and continuously frame it that way. I hope that was helpful.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello, Daryl.
I loved your list of 8 techniques. I've also had some really good success with senior leaders with the technique of a Gemba walk, of asking them to come and... Have you had any experience using that one? Do you find it useful? Is that something that would fit into your toolkit?
Absolutely. I just didn't think of it. Usually because I am the senior manager and I'm dragging other people along for the gamble walk. But it is actually really good. And one of the reasons is that you're not facing someone. You're walking beside them. And there is something there where you're like kind of syncing your autonomic nervous system. And so very frequently, if you have a conversation that might be a rough conversation and whatnot, it gives them all the ability to talk to you and not look you in the eye, to kind of, just be kind of sitting candid corner to one another while you're down the street. And I hope that I heard the gambit walk, right? Yeah. And I'm talking about the right thing and I understand what you're saying? Yes. Thumbs up on that. I just need a technique number 9 now. Thank you. Any other techniques that you would like to share? Because, there's got to be a lot of experience in this room. If anybody has anything that they do. Yes?
Hello. Good talk, by the way.
Thank you.
One thing that I've tried to coach a lot of, like myself and other producers, is not what you're saying or how you frame it. It's also the medium. So some people trying to understand, like, do people like to be talked at? Do they want it in an email? Do they want pictures? So have you had any kind of insights into how you shifted the way that you would communicate for different personality types?
Yes. So I often, at the start of a project, I try to get to know my senior stakeholders. The first thing I do is the who's who in the zoo, and I try to target in, like, who are the people that I need to know and need to talk to. And then I will deliberately go have a coffee with them before I have anything going on, just to kind of understand who are they, what do they need. In that situation, I might say things like, well, how do you like to be communicated with? How do you get your information from this team? What can I do in order to support you? And I really try to I like to play the servant leadership role. It works for me a lot. It does have its weaknesses, though. I just pointed it out. Like, when I was doing the research for this, I went, wow, that is so true. In those situations, there's two things that I would say. The first one is that where you can accommodate, do it. But also note that often you are the central pivot for like 30 plus people that you are trying to manage at a given point in time. And how tailored can you be? Like, if Bob wants SMSs and Jane wants emails and somebody else wants like a text message, you kind of have to shape that. Now, this presentation isn't about communications planning, but a lot of that stuff would go into communications planning and saying, this is the way that I am going to approach. But when we talk about that, the buy-in equation, the first thing is that you get up front, you have those conversations to understand who they are, and then you figure out proactively, how am I going to stay in touch with this person? I would want to make sure that I'm talking to every person no less than once a month, more ideally once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. Any longer than that, I'm starting to fall out of their mind's eye. They're not thinking about me. I'm not important to them. And that just comes into the communications planning. I hope that answered the question. Yes?
I think something that it brought up for me as well is understanding the broader context that they have to deal with and how important or less important what it is that you need them to help you with actually is in the grand scheme of whatever they have to deal with. So, sometimes when I'm coaching people to manage up, it's like, okay, well, what are all the other things that senior leader actually has to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and how important is what you're bringing to them in the grand scheme of what they have to care about? And sometimes it's really important. It's like their number one priority. And sometimes it's so little that they go, okay, great, you're like, it's really important to you, but actually how you need to bring it to them is, I just need this little thing approved or something, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's actually really important. That's where we were talking about values. Sometimes you will be the least important thing on the 10 things that person has to do a day. And so if you want, the hard part is that you still have to do your job. So how do you get into that? That's where you go, how does my value proposition or what I'm doing play into what they need or what they do, and that makes them look good and supports their KPIs and whatnot, and use that as your pathway into the communication. Very, very good observation. Thank you. Yes?
You were mentioning before about the decision repository. It's your responsibility as the manager or the senior manager to record the decisions. What do you do when the repository is disputed?
Oh, okay. Two things in there. The first one is that I feel that it is my responsibility to make sure that it is done. I don't necessarily take responsibility for doing it. So sometimes it's just part of the team process that whenever they have a decision, it gets recorded into the decision register to avoid trying to be the central bottleneck for everything. Just wanted to add that little bit of clarification. What do I do when it's disputed? I say, well, I followed the process and it is in here. I will give you one opportunity to discuss with the people that are listed. So when I do my decision register, it usually looks something like, here's the date, here's the decision, here's the people involved. If the person that's coming to me to talk about the decision is one of those people, I would just say, hey, you're part of the decision. It's already been recorded. Your time was at that point. If it is somebody that wasn't involved, and here's the question, did I get the stakeholders wrong in that meeting? Then I would say, okay, well, let's have a bit of a conversation just to make sure. And the first thing I do, the first gate is this worth my time, and is this something, like, should I shut this down? Because it is potentially just a distraction. Other times I'll go, well, what's the reasoning? Give me that information, and I'll go, actually, this is something we could have missed because maybe we didn't have the right stakeholder in the room and that really was something that we needed to consider. In that case, I would revisit it either with the people that, well, usually with the people that had already made the decision, say, hey, look, Bob's brought up a really good thing that we need to consider. Do we stick with this decision or not? But ideally, if you've done your analysis the right way, Bob is in the room before you go. And usually I try to have some sort of clause in my work agreements that are, if you are sick on that day, the show still must go on and the decision will be made without you and you just have to suck it up when you get back. So hopefully that answers the question. Yes?
Hi. You mentioned on the topic of building intimacy through sort of candid conversations, going for a coffee, catching up in the kitchen. Maybe it's a little bit out of scope for this conversation, but do you have any techniques or recommendations for having those candid conversations remotely? Because I find I struggle a lot with having a set start and end time, usually with agenda items.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few ways to go about it. I do find that remotely is harder than in face or face-to-face. But here are a few things I do. So right now, my studio is entirely remote. The first thing that I do is every morning we have a social get-together. Everybody starts at 9:30 in the morning, and there's a social hour, and everybody can just like be there. And that gives the opportunity for people to drop in, drop out, and have a conversation. The second thing is that if I have not spoken to somebody in a certain period of time, I will structurally reach out to them. I have something in my calendar that says, have I spoken to these 3 people this week? And if I've spoken to 2 of them, I won't approach the 3rd one. But I will always make sure that I have at least had a conversation, even if it is just a Slack message of, hey, how's it going? Should we catch up? You know, that sort of thing. Another thing that I do is a working bee kind of thing. So often we'll block something out where just people get in, we're working, we're not necessarily actually talking about work, but we're all on the same Discord channel while we're working. And it gives that opportunity for natural conversation to flow. So it kind of depends on what the intent is or what type of building you want to do. Some of it has to be private, and it could just be, hey, we haven't spoken for a while. Why don't we just catch up for 10 minutes or something like that? And I would love to hear about your day, you know. There's a few ways that, is that helpful, or are there more? Yeah, okay, great. Glad I answered the question. Any other questions I can help? I have the 5-minute sign flowing, but I actually think we might, okay, 5 minutes to go. Any other questions? Yes?
It's a really lame question, but I missed tip number 3.
Oh, let me go back because I'm not sure which one is tip 3. Let's see, 3, the why analysis. Ah, this is what we were getting to.
2, but there's only been 3. Wait, go to the next slide.
Oh, that's just me not being able to number things. See, I told you, I am not an expert. I'm still a student learning myself how to count. But thank you. There was no tip number 3. So apparently I gave you 7 ways to do it, but we have the gambling now as your 8th. Thank you so much, Organa, my dear friends. Yeah, may I also suggest, like I said, I think there's a lot of experience in this room. I see people that I know are producers. Do you have any other things that you do? Because, you know, I've kind of learned this, but I still have days where I go in and I try to manage my senior stakeholders and I walk out and I go, oh, that didn't go well. Okay. Yes?
Sorry, do you have any sort of go-to phrases when, I guess maybe you're in the middle of a status update, and then you get sort of out of the blue, like a really tough question or something that's kind of, I guess, confronting, like, well, that's just not right, or we're not hitting the mark, or we can't do anything, but...
Oh, gosh. Sorry if you would be on the receiving end of something like that. That's somebody not abiding by the, hey, don't call people out in public unless you really, really need to. Usually I would say, thank you for that. Can we take that offline? Or I actually need to do a little bit of investigation to understand the particulars around what you're saying. Now is probably not a good time for that because we're in the middle of this, but I would love to catch up with you afterwards and let's have a discussion. And for those, if you have things where you've had something happen more than once, that's when you build your canned responses. So go ahead and think of like polite ways to sort those things out. And like, I think I have like 20 of them that I've learned over the years, and I'll just pull the same thing out of my butt in a different way at different times.
Can we get that, please?
I can write one down. I've had a few of them in here. It's been peppered through. But yeah, I could probably write one down and send it out to people who are interested. Come up and give me your email address if you want a list of canned responses for things that could happen at work. I don't know that my list would match yours, but yeah. Any other questions that I can help with? Well then, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope something is useful to you. Oh, yeah. Very quickly, you can link up with me. And if you want the list, send me an email saying I would like your list. And I'll put together something for you. All right, thank you very much for your time, everyone.